This is the moment it happened. The moment the Gman realized that the events over the past few days, set in motion by the Vortigaunt's meddling, had derailed whatever he had planned for Gordon Freeman, the Resistance, and the Combine. The death of Eli Vance changed everything. Of course, his employers had authorized him to nudge events across space and time in a particular direction, but something like this required a stronger intervention. Everything happens for a reason, until it doesn't. Eli was dead, and then he wasn't. In this episode, we will dive into why and how the Gman nudged the timeline back into place, the power he wields, what his motivations are, and how both he and his employers are perceived by the other beings that inhabit the universe. So, sit back and relax as I, Scarion, explore how the Gman retconned Half-Life. This is the end of the story as we know it. The Resistance has launched a rocket and collapsed a super portal before it could fully mature. A portal the Combine desperately needed, one capable of bringing through an army of reinforcements required to regain their control over Earth. Humanity and Vault-kind are ecstatic. This is their first major victory in 2 decades, but the Gman is not happy. This was not in the plan, and now unforeseen consequences are on the way. One of these comes with the violent death of Resistance leader Dr. Eli Vance, killed after Combine advisors crash into the hangar just as Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance are preparing to leave for the Arctic North. As Eli bleeds out in the arms of his daughter and her cries fill the hangar, the Gman watches from above and sees. Everything that had happened over the past few days was never meant to happen. This was never the plan. It had been altered against his will. So what changed, and how did the Gman intend to set things right? Well, to answer that, we first need to understand who, or perhaps more importantly, what the Gman is, and what exactly had begun working against his interests. For all we know, as mere mortals, the all-powerful Gman could be little more than a grunt within his organization. An interdimensional bureaucrat carrying out the orders of his employers with very little agency of his own. Their operation across space and time appears to test agents before hiring their services out to the highest bidder. Who or what these bidders are is unknown. The Gman, specifically, watches pivotal moments unfold and nudges them into place, forcing events to snap into a timeline he and the bidders had already foreseen. This entity does not perceive reality as a human does. He experiences and observes multiple moments across different places and points in time simultaneously. The perfect being for a role like this. Through him, humans are tested with almost impossible situations and expected to survive. Those who do are collected as agents against their will. Puppets given only the illusion of choice, with their services offered to bidders to carry out missions across time. One of these agents was Dr. Gordon Freeman, a human who had been unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. A disappointment to the Gman. Part of the reason everything had gone so wrong. So, how did we get to this moment? In the grand chess match of the universe, humans are little more than pawns, moved into position by the Gman. Each mission, each game, is another test orchestrated by his organization to establish the character of a potential agent and set them on a particular path. The first mission known to us was the Xen Heist, and it produced 3 extraordinary outcomes. The hiring of Gordon Freeman, the partial freedom of the Vortigaunts, and the acquisition of the border world of Xen. A world that gave the organization access to countless other worlds and dimensions. Everything about this had already been established, little dominoes placed years in advance, all leading towards this exact moment. How did Black Mesa discover Xen in the first place? Who gave them that crystal sample, GG-3883? Who pushed the administrator to push the anomalous materials team to bypass the anti-mass spectrometer's standard safety protocols, which tore open space and time? Every aspect of the disaster had been put into motion long before Gordon Freeman ever stepped inside the test chamber. The Gman had been behind all of this, and as the incident unfolded, he watched the aftermath play out, ensuring everything went to plan, ensuring Gordon Freeman survived against impossible odds, traversed a fallen science facility, crossed the hostile world of Xen, and ultimately entered the chamber of the Nylanth, the ruler of this border world and an obstacle standing between the Gman, his employers, and control over Xen. It was only after Gordon Freeman defeated the creature that he was granted an audience with the Gman. Unknown to him, however, he had no real control over how this interaction would unfold. He had already proven himself the perfect candidate for the role of an agent.
Gordon Freeman in the flesh. Or rather, in the hazard suit. I took the liberty of relieving you of your weapons. Most of them were government property. As for the suit, I think you've earned it. The border world, Xen, is in our control. For the time being, thanks to you. Quite a nasty piece of work you managed over there. I am impressed. That's why I'm here, Mr. Freeman. I have recommended your services to my employers, and they have authorized me to offer you a job. They agree with me that you have limitless potential. You've proved yourself a decisive man, so I don't expect you'll have any trouble deciding what to do. If you're interested, just step into the portal and I will take that as a yes. Otherwise, well, I can offer you a battle you have no chance of winning. Rather an anticlimax after what you've just survived.
The G-Man was always 10 steps ahead, or should I say, thousands. Each nudge altered the events of this timeline, pushing everything towards some greater outcome. But the acquisition of a place like Xen came with consequences, one of them being the Combine's invasion of Earth. Even still, gaining the ability to expand and traverse further across the multiverse through Xen was, I guess, considered a fair trade-off. Gordon Freeman was not the only human acquired during the Black Mesa incident. Another man had also survived against insurmountable odds, Corporal Adrian Shepard. Once again, someone the G-Man had been watching long before this disaster began, taking steps to ensure Adrian was inside Black Mesa exactly when he needed to be. As for Adrian, he still waits in stasis with no concept of time or thought, and there may be many more agents suspended somewhere outside of our reality, waiting for their time to come, waiting to be assigned a mission, waiting for the highest bidder to select them and send them back into the universe to enact another nudge. It had been 20 years since the Black Mesa incident and the disappearance of Gordon Freeman, and a lot had changed. After the invasion, the Combine had broken humanity following mankind's offer of servitude in exchange for survival. However, over those 2 decades, a resistance had formed, one that consisted of several survivors of Black Mesa. To Freeman, however, none of those 20 years had passed. In stasis, he had no concept of time or how long he had been there. To him, he had entered stasis mere moments before. Then he heard his voice. It was time for a new mission to begin.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
Just as he had been during the Black Mesa incident, Freeman was placed exactly where he needed to be to begin his journey. This time, instead of a science facility, it was across a Combine-occupied Earth. A puppet set on a path, there to nudge the right dominoes and watch them fall. The Vortigaunts called him the Freeman, but Freeman was no more free than they were. His strings were hidden, even from them. And the dominoes fell quickly. Eli Vance was captured following the invasion of the Resistance headquarters of Black Mesa East. Freeman's attempt to rescue him led to the fall of Nova Prospect, which in turn helped ignite an uprising across City 17. That uprising would eventually reach its climax at the very top of the Citadel, the Combine's most important stronghold on Earth, where Freeman, Eli Vance, Judith Mossman, Alyx Vance, and Dr. Wallace Breen finally met. Interestingly enough, Wallace knew a little about the strings that were pulled.
And this one has proven to be a fine pawn for those who control him.
No!
Don't listen to him, Gordon.
How about it, Dr. Freeman? Did you realize your contract was open to the highest bidder?
This confrontation came to a head as Breen attempted to escape, with Freeman and Alyx pursuing him through the Citadel. Gordon Freeman fired spheres of dark energy into the reactor, eventually blasting one directly into the Citadel's core, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. The portal above the Citadel collapsed, Breen seemingly fell to his death, and Citadels across the planet were disabled. In an instant, Earth was cut off from all access and communication with the Combine overworld. As the Citadel erupted around them and the explosion threatened to consume Freeman and Alyx, the Gman intervened and stopped time. The mission was over. The end goal that had been foreseen had finally been reached.
Time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again? It seems as if you only just arrived. You've done a great deal in a small time span. You've done so well, in fact, that I've received some interesting offers for your services. Ordinarily, I wouldn't contemplate them, but these are extraordinary times. Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you, if and when your time comes round again. I do apologize for what must seem to you an arbitrary imposition, Dr. Freeman. I trust it will all make sense to you in the course of... well, I'm really not at liberty to say. In the meantime, this is where I get off.
And with that, the human was returned to stasis, stored away until the next mission required him. His actions since returning had destabilized the Combine's control over Earth, exactly as someone had intended. Perhaps it was one of the bidders, perhaps it was the employers themselves. Whoever had wanted it done, they had acted through the Gman, and through him it had been accomplished. Up until this point, everything had gone accordingly to plan. Every important moment had been foreseen, every outcome accounted for, but the Gman was not the only entity capable of manipulating time, nor was he the only one able to foresee events before they came to pass. Through the Vortessence, Vortigaunts have communicated across vast distances for ages, drawn upon its energy to power technology and defend themselves, and, most importantly, navigated the vortal threads of space and time to see what is and what will be. Long before the Black Mesa incident, the Vortigaunts had fled to Xen to escape the Combine, only to fall into another existence of enslavement. After being freed, they would soon find themselves enslaved once again when the Combine conquered Earth, and thus, many of those who escaped capture joined the human resistance. This moment, right here, was always meant to happen. The Citadel would explode, Freeman would be taken away and stored safely, and Alyx Vance would perish in the aftermath. And it was this species, allies of humankind, who, through their sacred practice of antlion husbandry, got in the way of the G-Man's plan. You see, a Vortigaunt's natural connection to the Vortessence already granted them incredible abilities, but when enhanced with an extract harvested from antlion larvae, their powers could rival even those of the G-Man. When time resumed and the Citadel's dark fusion reactor continued its violent collapse, a group of enhanced Vortigaunts intervened. They stopped time, teleported in, grabbed Alyx and sent her to safety. With Alyx out of danger, they turned their attention to Gordon. Not only did they know of the G-Man, his manipulations and his tactics, they also knew how to access the stasis vault outside of space and time where he stored his agents. In what can only be described as a stasis heist, this group of Vortigaunts broke into the G-Man's realm and tracked down Gordon Freeman, but an intrusion like this did not go unnoticed. The entity felt their presence and attempted to stop them, only to find their combined powers strong enough to keep him at bay. For perhaps the first time, the G-Man had been directly obstructed by forces he could not brush aside. His human asset was stolen, and the interference clearly angered him. And so, up to that point, everything had gone accordingly to plan. Then the Vortigaunts intervened. Everything that followed was never meant to happen, a deviation from the design of the G-Man, his employers and the bidders who hired out the agents. Over the following days, Alyx Vance and Gordon Freeman downloaded a data packet from the Citadel, helped evacuate the city's refugees before its destruction, and made their way across the Outlands towards White Forest, another resistance base. Normally, throughout Gordon's missions, the Gman was never far away, always lingering somewhere just within view, but this time, he was nowhere to be seen. It was not because he had lost track of his rogue agent, nor because Freeman had consciously chosen to defy him. Gordon had no idea there was a plan to defy in the first place. The Vortigaunts, through their combined power, were continuing to keep the entity away from the scientist, preventing him from interfering with what they had set in motion. Their plan, their foreseen future. It was only when Alyx was severely injured by a Combine hunter, forcing the Vortigaunts to turn their attention towards healing her, that the G-Man was finally able to make contact with the free man, to steer him back, to somehow salvage the damage his existence in this moment had caused.
Dr. Freeman, I realize this moment may not be the most convenient for a heart-to-heart, but I had to wait until your friends were otherwise occupied. There was a time they cared nothing for Miss Vance, when their only experience of humanity was a crowbar coming at them down a steel corridor. When I plucked her from Black Mesa, I acted in the face of objections that she was a mere child and of no practical use to anyone. I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question. Still, I am not one to squander my investments, and I remain confident she was worth far more than the initial appraisal. That's why I must now extract from you some small repayment owed for your own survival. See her safely to White Forest, Dr. Freeman. I wish I could do more than keep an eye on you, but I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions. Well, now listen carefully, my dear. When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
And now we're back at White Forest, following Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance's successful journey there. With them came a data packet containing the coordinates of the Combine overworld, giving the Resistance what it needed to launch a rocket and close the super portal, along with information revealing Judith Mossman's location. Had the Vortigaunt not intervened atop the Citadel, the Resistance's attempt to close the super portal would have likely failed, while Judith Mossman's fate would have been left entirely in the hands of Combine forces in the Arctic North. But that intervention had consequences in the other direction as well. The Combine advisors, now desperate to secure reinforcements and maintain control, would go on to attack the hangar at White Forest and murder Dr. Eli Vance. Had events remained on their intended course, that attack would never have happened. In the power struggle between the G-Man and the Vortigaunts, all of the nudges and manipulations that had brought events this far had seemingly been for nothing. But through the Vortigaunt's interference, the G-Man had noticed something interesting. Gordon Freeman had become a disappointment, but Alyx Vance offered a way to correct the situation. She was much like Gordon, possessing the qualities the G-Man valued in an agent: intelligent, adaptable, and capable of surviving situations that should have killed her. And now, with the death of her father, She had something he could exploit: motivation. So the G-Man began putting a new plan into motion, one that could correct the costly mistake that was Eli Vance's death, while also securing himself a new agent. Now that we understand why the timeline had to change, from the G-Man's perspective at least, we can explore how he intended to change it. More specifically, how he planned to retcon the death of Eli Vance. Just like any other potential agent, the G-Man had to be certain that Alyx Vance was the perfect fit. She was respected by both humanity and Vault-kind, resourceful under pressure, and remarkably quick to adapt when situations spiraled beyond her control. On paper, she was exactly what he and his employers needed. There was just one problem. At 24 years old, Alyx had already experienced too much. She knew too much. The G-Man needed a version of Alyx who was younger, more impressionable, and easier to manipulate. A version of her from before she even knew who Gordon Freeman was. To get this version of Alyx, the G-Man went back 5 years and, much like he had done with Gordon Freeman, Adrian Shepard and possibly countless other humans, set up a sequence of events designed to lead her directly into his employment. Ever countless steps ahead, the entity entered an apartment building, looked out through a window and waited for it to happen. Within moments, he, the building, and everyone inside just disappeared. The Combine, of course, were already aware of the G-Man and what he was capable of. He had been interfering with their plans for some time, and he knew exactly how they perceived him. As a virus, infecting and manipulating major events. They knew he had been behind the Black Mesa incident, and interestingly enough, they also knew how to weaken him. It was through the Vault that the Combine believed they had finally achieved a victory over the entity. What they did not know was that their victory was part of his plan. His eventual freedom was the final checkpoint in a long sequence of objectives stretching across City 17 and into the quarantine zone, where the Vault floated above. The Vault itself was not powered by electricity, but by the Vault Essence, an energy source harvested and stored from imprisoned Vortigauns who were treated as little more than living batteries. While the rest of the captured building remained suspended in time, its former residents frozen like echoes at the exact moment it was taken. The G-Man was held somewhere else entirely. In this specially crafted cage, infused frequently with Vault Essence energy, the G-Man waited for his savior to arrive. The shape of this prison is also very interesting, especially with how the Combine perceived the G-Man as a virus. This entity was not just contained inside one icosahedron, but within a second, smaller icosahedron at its core. This shape is commonly found in viruses, with some using what are known as icosahedral capsids, protein shells that contain and protect the genetic material inside them. For him to be trapped inside and his powers nullified by Vault Essence energy worked for the Combine, but for him, this was only temporary. It was during a routine day of reconnaissance, monitoring the construction of the Citadel in City 17, that 19-year-old Alyx Vance received a call from her father. Eli and another Resistance member, Russell, had broken into a Combine stockyard to retrieve a mini-reactor. While inside, however, Russell hacked into the Combine construction network and stumbled across something far more important than the reactor they had gone there to steal. Hidden within the system were images of what the Resistance believed to be a Combine superweapon, housed inside a massive structure known simply as the Vault. Like so many missions set in motion by the Gman, discovering this file was only the first domino to fall in a much larger chain. Russell's access to the file immediately triggered a system flag, and it wasn't long before civil protection units were mobilized to track down the humans responsible. Russell managed to escape, but Dr. Vance wasn't so lucky. He was captured by the civil protection. Alyx was also captured as she attempted to intervene. The relationship between Alyx and her father was a massive motivator for her, and the G-Man knew it. If there was one thing guaranteed to push Alyx forward, it was Eli. On her way to be booked in, Alyx was rescued by Russell and guided to safety in his secret lab. The Resistance knew exactly what happened to those identified as members of their cause. A one-way trip to the horrific prison of Nova Prospect. And so, Alyx's journey to save her father began, to stop the train he was on. This path took her into the quarantine zone, a region of the city sealed away from the rest following the uncontrolled expansion of Xen's flora and fauna. It was here that she met Gary, a Vortigaunt who had managed to escape Combine captivity. Gary, however, hadn't escaped unscathed. During his captivity, the Combine had driven a drill directly into his head, leaving him with a severe brain injury. His connection to the Vortessence had been severed, and the little fragments he remembered were scattered and confused. That, and the fact events had shifted due to the G-Man's influence. Gary, just like Alyx, had his own concerns.
The Combine have other of my kin. Like the Eli Vance, the Alyx Vance, will free them.
I would help. I really would, but the Alyx Vance is honestly very busy saving her dad.
You will not save him. He is dead.
What?
Or he will be.
Is or will be?
It is a matter of perspective. But Alyx Vance alone cannot prevent his fate.
Alone she could not, but she had no idea what the severed Vortigaunt meant. Alyx later fought her way through the rest of the sewers and into the train yard, where she derailed the train transporting her father. With Gary's help, she rescued him, but the threat of a superweapon was too great to ignore. As a result, Eli sent Alyx deeper into the quarantine zone to find out more about it. Alyx's successful traversal through the quarantine zone was already an incredible feat, a clear sign that she was perfect to become an agent. She survived the claustrophobic Xenian-infested halls of the Northern Star Hotel, rescued the Vortigaunts from their battery prisons, met Jeff, and experienced a zoo. Each location she visited would have killed a normal person, but she showed incredible potential and promise. At another train yard, she overheard a conversation between a human scientist and a Combine advisor, and learned that the Vault was not a superweapon, but a prison.
You took over the entire planet in 7 hours. How is this taking so long? Oh, no, fine. I can wait. Oh, sarcasm. Well, I'm thrilled you caught that. Yes, that was sarcasm as well. And just to remind you, the thing I need to talk to your boss about is how we're running out of time. Well, what about if I went and got my supervisor? Would that move the needle No, that's the point. I am my supervisor. You're killing me.
We need to move the box, or this thing is going to be Black Mesa all over again. Well, now I'm telling you it is ready. Look, if it's still here when she gets there, he's gone. What in the history of today makes you think you're going to stop her? Look, this guy we've got in there survived Black Mesa. He raised holy hell and then just disappeared. We finally caught him and you're just going to let him go again? Move the box!
And this was it. The final push to access the vault. If the Gordon Freeman was still alive, trapped by the Combine, it could change everything for the Resistance. But just like Gordon Freeman, Alyx was a puppet who had been guided on this journey. She brought down the vault and entered it. She released the Gman under the impression she was freeing Gordon, and her mission came to an end. She passed the test.
Impressive work, Ms. Vance.
Gordon Freeman?
Gordon Freeman. Ms. Vance, you wouldn't need all that to imprison Gordon Freeman.
So, who are you?
Perhaps what I am is not as important as what I can offer you in exchange for coming all this way. Some believe the fate of our worlds is inflexible. My employers disagree. They authorize me to nudge things in a particular direction from time to time. What would you want nudged, Miss Vance?
The Combine off Earth. I want the Combine off Earth.
That would be a considerably large nudge. Too large, given the interests of my employers.
Well, you asked.
What if I could offer you something you don't know you want?
Oh, God, no. Dad, please. Just stay with me.
Dad? Dad? What? Is that me? What is this? What's happening?
We are in the future. This is the moment where you watch your father die. Unless
What? Unless what?
Unless you were to take matters into your own hands. Release your father, Miss Vance. Good. As a consequence of your action, this entity will continue, and this entity will not.
Right. So he's okay, right? He lives. My dad lives.
You are aware that you've proven yourself to be of extraordinary value. A previous hire has been unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. We have struggled to find a suitable replacement until now.
No! I just want to go home.
Send me home!
I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation, Miss Vance.
Wait! Hey, wait! Wait! Wait!
The Gman had used Alyx's desperation to save her father to nudge an event in his favor. It appears he was unable to intervene in mortal affairs himself. He needed someone else to do it for him. With this rewrite in history, this retcon, the Gman had, like a virus, altered a pivotal moment in the timeline. Gordon Freeman was no longer his chosen agent, Alyx Vance was, and with that change made in the past, the future adapted. Eli was alive, and Alyx was plucked from that moment.
Gordon! Wake up, Gordon! She's gone, Gordon. She's gone. Son of a bitch, it has unforeseen consequences. I knew it. When I get my hands on him, I'm gonna kill him. Right now. We got work to do.
The G-Man and his employers manipulated history through carefully placed agents and small interventions. Gordon's role had gone so well until the Vortigaunts had meddled, an interference that had created a chain of unforeseen events. With a salvaged timeline, we have to think about what this means for the future, and what this means for Eli specifically. His life appears to be important to the G-Man. Alyx is likely stored in stasis, locked in place until she is selected for a mission. It took 20 years for Gordon to be returned to Earth for his first official mission. How long will it take for Alyx? And for the Resistance going forward? The Combine is still cut off from Earth, but there is still work to be done. We will just have to wait to see how the next chapter plays out, if it ever does. And that was why and how the G-Man retconned Half-Life. It has been a while since I've made a Half-Life video. I've really wanted to get back to this series, but we had the Doom the Dark Ages Revelations release, and then there have been some updates with the new Fable game. I wanted to come back to the series with something interesting, and I've always loved how Valve used Half-Life Alyx as a way to retcon the death of Eli Vance in-universe. It really goes along with the theory that the G-Man is Valve. It is a shame the game was an exclusive because the story is absolutely fantastic, but a lot of the fanbase were unable to play it. If the rumours of a new Half-Life are true, which at this point I'll only believe they are when I see an official announcement, Valve have seemingly put themselves in a strong position, I guess, to continue the story. To continue the hype after such a devastating ending that was Episode 2 would be an enormous task. Every game in the Half-Life series is cause and effect, and I wonder now what role Alyx will play in the next one. This one once again turned into a deep dive when I intended it to be a shorter episode, but I'm happy with how it turned out. As usual, I would like to shout out my thumbnail artist, Chick, who created the masterpiece on the screen right now. These thumbnails, early access, scripts and screenshots are also uploaded to Patreon and channel memberships when videos are posted. As for what I've been playing, I'm still going through Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's been months now, and at this point, I think it'll never end. What are you playing? If you like this deep dive, then why not check out this video where I explored how horrific Nova Prospekt is, or this one where I looked at how the Vortigaunts are actually the villains of the series. Finally, thanks to my patrons and channel members who are scrolling on the screen right now.